we're recording the session, sorry, I just wanted to let everyone know, because we will prepare a thought piece post the event so that you can share within your organizations, share within your relevant partnerships. But what I was going to say is it's been really interesting to see the kinds of innovations coming out of the private sector, really to work with business to drive the role of HR, to highlight how critical our HR executive teams are in shaping the skills development strategies within our organizations. I think we will all agree that skills are fundamental to people's lives. We know that these are fundamental to the success of business, particularly if we look at how companies are planning around ESG. People are becoming more centered and central to the delivery of the organizational strategy and at the heart of any flourishing economy. If nothing else, the last 12 to 14 months of living through COVID has shown how important it is to build up people within our organizations, within our communities. And, you know, the role of employment and the role of skills is not just personal benefit. It really is part of this virtuous cycle of strengthening society, of growing economies, and of building better lives. And you know, it's been clear that irrespective of the sector that one operates in or the specific tasks that need to be carried out, without the right set of skills, businesses cannot function and cannot grow. It's something we've seen as a trend over the last 10 years. Workforce planning has become increasingly demanding, and those of you who are at the coalface of designing skills strategies, of designing learning and development initiatives, of planning, you know, doing succession planning, I think you will understand firsthand and appreciate how challenging this environment is, but also the influence of external factors, whether it's the impact of technology and the rapid rate of change that we're experiencing, the changing demographics of the workforce, the changing nature of work. I think fundamentally we're seeing a shift in work and workplaces. I think the impact of the green economy, the sustainability agenda is becoming core to how we approach skilling and people management and people development. And I think, as I mentioned just now, the impact of COVID-19 is something that we cannot ignore because it has left a lasting effect on the nature of work, on labor relations, on the shape and form of work, on how we engage with the economy. And you know, it's going to be up to those of you in this HR executive function to really take up the responsibility for addressing this shifting world of work and the disruptions as well as the opportunities. I think we tend to focus on the disruptions and what the disruptions mean, but there is an opportunity factor that we need to take into account in all of this. And it does require companies to ensure that you plan appropriately the set of skills that you have access to today, but you also need to be somewhat of a fortune teller because you need to anticipate the skills that are going to be coming down the line. And you need to develop appropriate strategies to plan and to put in place initiatives to ensure that you skill appropriately. So it's a little bit difficult to, you know, tell many organizations or to ask many organizations to forecast what skills you're going to need in 5 years' time, because at the moment 5 years seems like a lifetime. But when it comes to the HR function, that's really what you're going to have to do. So we're hoping that this session today and the work that was done in putting together this guide will give you some insights into good practice, gives you some opportunity to understand how sustainable skills development strategies can be incorporated into your own organizational development processes, and how you can look at these strategies to really future-proof your business. We know that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are many different examples that have been put together in the guide, and we are trusting that these will give you some guidance and some insights into thinking around the world, different sectors, and guidance with your skills development approaches. So with that very brief introduction, I want to thank you all. I was remiss, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nazreen Mani. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Apprenticeship Network, and I'm very delighted today to be joined by eminent speakers in our partnership, in our membership across WBCSD and the GAN. You're going to hear this morning from James Gom, who is the Director for People and Society at the WBCSD. We will have a panel discussion with representatives from Zurich Insurance, Firmenich, Pirelli, and PwC. So François Robach is the General Manager for Switzerland, the Senior Vice President for Human Resources at Firmenich. Donatella De Vita is the Global Head of Development, Learning, Engagement, and Welfare at Pirelli. Idano De Chico is the Head of Global HR Talent and Organization at Pirelli. And Alison Maskell is UK Talent Planning and Development, Zurich Insurance. Juliet Studdard, who will also join the panel, is the Director at PwC UK. And Monique Malcolm-Hay will be, from PwC, will be taking us through a Q&A. So with that very brief introduction, and I've chosen today not to go into the speaker profiles because that will take up too much time, and we want to hear from our speakers because all of them are really excellent role models in their own sectors. They have such interesting insights to share from their organizations as well as their personal experience. So without further ado, let me hand over to James, the Director for People and Society, WBCSD. And James, I know that you have some slides that you'd like to share, so please go ahead and share. And James is going to give us a background, an overview to the guide, as well as position the issue of skills for sustainability within the context of the SDGs, as well as the role of business in driving these sustainable strategies for the future of work. So James, over to you.
Thanks, Nazreen. Good morning. You always have to say good morning, afternoon, evening these days, wherever you are in the world. Hello. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on behalf of WBCSD to highlight the skills strategies guide that we've worked together with GAN and our other partners to produce. This has been a great learning journey for us and for our member companies, and very happy to share with you some highlights of it today before our what I'm sure will be a really fascinating panel discussion. Just a little bit of a quick intro on WBCSD. Apart from being one of the world's worst acronyms to say, who are we and what do we do? WBCSD is short for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We're a business membership organization of around 200 multinational companies, the CEO-led, and really come together to try and tackle sustainability challenges that are too hard or too expansive for a single organization to tackle by itself. So that's really, we create this safe, pre-competitive space for business to explore solutions to some of the key challenges that we'll face on the road to realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. And although WBCSD's logo may not be familiar to you, hopefully some of these companies will be. These are our current 200 member companies, and we're always very grateful for their leadership and their support in tackling the global sustainable development agenda. We focus on a range of different areas through from circular economy to climate to production of a more sustainable food system, but particularly my area of focus is people and society. And that's obviously we're going to be looking at the people side of things today. One thing I wanted to highlight that WBCSD has published recently in the last couple of months is a new effectively a 10-year strategy document for WBCSD and the global business community to look at how we can work towards realizing by 2050 a world where 9 billion people or 9+ billion people are living well within planetary boundaries. And that's what we've called our Vision 2050 document, which really sets out a stall for us as an organization and for our members, saying what do we need to achieve over the course of the next 10 years to put us on course to realizing that vision of a world where people are living well within the boundaries of the planet. And that vision lays out 9 pathways that we're exploring. So key areas of business activity, key societal needs that business exists to serve and create. And for each of these areas, we've laid out a pathway to Vision 2050, focusing on what we need to be achieving over the course of the next decade and beyond in order for us to live a more sustainable society. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if we take a very quick look at some of these pathways, each of these pathways has a vision, it has key transitions that it lays out, things that need to happen over the course of the next 20 years or so. And then it also has action areas for business. And I won't go into detail, you can find all this information online in more detail. But the key point I'm trying to emphasize here is that each of these action areas for business, one of those actions is always related to the social side and largely around upskilling. So the need for us to transition sustainably, for us to transition in a just and equitable way, in the context of the energy pathway, for example, or in the context of mobility in our mobility pathway and transportation pathway, to look at moving towards new models and new ways of working in a way that empowers and engages people and workers. So this is a key element that sits at the heart of our strategy for the next 10 years. And really that people piece, that worker piece is a critical piece for us to explore as an organization, as a collective. And that's really why we have a future of work working group at WBCSD, in order to explore these issues in more detail and to rally our members behind a vision of a world where people work to thrive personally, professionally, and as active members of society. And we advocate that we should be working towards efforts to secure a world where work provides security, well-being, empowerment, and purpose, and really where people are at the heart of the future of work and decisions are made from a people-centric perspective. And we've gathered among our members, these companies here are taking a leading position in helping us to do that as part of our future of work working group. And we're working on a number of different areas, including technology and work and how the two interact, and will continue to interact in the future, and how technology should be deployed and rolled out in a responsible way that puts people at its center. We're looking very much at skills, which is our topic of discussion today, and also diving into depth into topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and worker health and well-being. But today we're really focused on that skills piece. It's our key area of focus for today. And when we're talking about skills, the key thing that we're looking at is really, in the context of our conversation today, is this new skill strategies for a sustainable society and sustainable future of work. So in 2020, WBCSD's Future of Work Public established a dedicated working group for businesses to share their experiences and distill best practice and develop collaborative solutions to address areas around skills development. And in this regard, we were really delighted to work with GAN Global, and drawing upon the rich discussions that we had between us and our members, WBCSD, GAN, and PwC.
Chiamiamolo cascading per capirci. Yeah.
I don't know. We're pleased to work together to produce the skills guide that we have before you today and that we'll talk about. And really, this is a guide to help inspire CHROs and HR decision makers that are setting out upon the skills development journey, and it presents a wide range of effective and appropriate skill solutions that leverages our interviews and inputs from the companies that you see there listed on the slide. And then in terms of context, I think it's important to note straight off the bat that the world of work is changing, as Nazreen mentioned. It's changing probably faster than any time before, and we're facing a complex disruption at the hands of 3 interconnected forces. So firstly, there's new technologies are being developed and adopted at an unprecedented rate. A range of technologies, in fact, including robotics, artificial intelligence, remote working, et cetera, they're all deeply changing the tasks and work patterns and are challenging us to think about how we function as companies. We also see a raft of global and socio-economic trends, potentially once-in-a-lifetime type trends that are emerging: climate change, rising inequality, shifting demographics, political polarization, migration, and to top it all off, COVID. So you name it, it's happening in the global socio-political sphere. And all of these are having an impact on global labor markets and look set to continue to do so over the course of what looks to be a fairly disruptive and turbulent decade ahead. And then, of course, we have shifting expectations of workers. The nature of work is changing and workers' expectations are shifting as well. So important that we factor those into our considerations. And in this time of extreme uncertainty and rapid digital adoption, designing and implementing a strategy to ensure that employees have the right skills required to perform well and thrive into the future is really more important, but also more challenging than ever before. The fact is that in recent years, the labour market has faced mounting problems related to the supply and demand of skills. We're finding too many people are seeing that they don't have the skills needed to take up the jobs that are available, and much less those that will be needed in the future. And we're seeing a mismatch between the skills that people have and the skills that companies need. And this is something that increasingly a number of business leaders are getting worried and concerned about. From PwC's annual CEO survey, we saw that 72% of CEOs are worried about the availability of key skills. We saw that 55% think that skills gaps mean that their organizations are failing to innovate properly. And that just over half of those CEOs that were surveyed also said that the lack of skills were pushing up their people-related costs. So significant concerns emerging from CEOs and business leaders around the skills gap. And while CEOs are perceiving real risks in failing to take action on addressing the skills match, I think we can explore these risks in a little bit more detail, in a more structured way, and we do so in the reports that we've published together with GAN and PwC. And through our discussions, really, we identified these 4 key risks to failing to adequately address the skills mismatch. So there's the widening skills gap. And the first risk really is, of course, if we do nothing to address the skills gap, it just gets wider. And organizations which don't take action to implement new skills and strategies risk allowing their employees to be left behind in this new world of work. And the longer the companies leave the gaps, the worse they will get and the harder it will get to close them. We also, secondly, see companies that do not take action to develop upskilling programs then risk having to fall back on unsustainable short-term solutions that drive up costs and deliver significantly reduced long-term benefits. And they also make themselves, as institutions, less attractive prospects to potential and future talent. Thirdly, and perhaps most fundamentally, if employees don't have the skill sets they need to drive business priorities, then this, of course, will prevent the company from actually competing in the market. So very much an existential threat to the business itself. And finally, companies not ensuring inclusive skills development miss out on the value that talent from diverse backgrounds and perspectives brings in developing new products, services, and models. And at a time when society is stretched, this can then contribute to perpetuating social inequalities, breeding discontent, eroding social cohesion, etc. So it affects the operating environment and potentially the long-term license to operate for business itself. So significant risks to failing to take any action on this upskilling agenda. But what should business leaders be doing to try and tackle some of these risks and to set themselves up for long-term prosperity as well as contributing to long-term social prosperity? So through our discussions as a group, we identified these 5 key action areas for business leaders and CHROs. First of all is to think long-term about their skills development strategies. And the world of work will invariably, like everything does, continue to adapt and change, and also at a much faster pace as digital technologies become more and more mainstreamed. Therefore, we need to build agile workforces and cultures of lifelong learning to really set us up to adapt to these various evolutions as they occur. And we would encourage, therefore, CEOs to think long-term about skills development, not just having sticking plaster solutions that address a need 1 year in advance. Second is analyzing your company's situation and choosing the best suited solutions. And so obviously skills is not a one-size-fits-all solution, not for an organization, but not even for different parts of an organization. It's really important to explore the needs of individual organizations, business units, or country offices, and then to develop solutions appropriately along those. Number 3 is empowering and engaging your employee base. So empower your employees to own and continuously drive their learning, utilizing new technologies and tools. Number 4 is building partnerships and collaboration. Obviously, if we've learned anything from working in the sustainable development space, it's that nothing happens without partnerships and collaboration. And this is very much true as well of skills when it comes to skills. ensuring that education and training responds to real needs. It requires business to move beyond its four walls and to work with a range of different partners to do that. And then finally is developing programs that promote diversity, inclusion, and access, as we've talked about before. It's really important to design programs which are inclusive and can be accessed by everyone to drive benefits for society and for the business itself. So that's the view from 50,000 feet, if you like. But what the skills guide also does is to then hone in on exactly what needs to happen on the ground. What are the crucial steps to developing a forward-looking skills strategy in practice? And so you can see these 5 steps laid out on the slide here. The steps that the guide explores. So the first step is assessing the business need. And this involves clearly identifying the key business priorities and how skills development feeds into them. Before you can really articulate how the skills of your people need to change, you need to know the results that we expect employees to deliver. So what does the business need and how would skills feed into that? The second key step is around laying the cultural foundation. So evaluate and adjusting policies, processes, and incentives to reinforce and encourage a culture that supports the organization's upskilling efforts. So there's no point having a skills need identified if you don't have the right culture to allow people to access those skills and to access the upskilling. And this needs to be done by backing up your skills programs with the appropriate investment and the appropriate C-suite level endorsement. Step 3 is around defining and sending new demand signals. So a demand signal, as I'm sure we'll hear today, is in relation to skills, can be seen as a message issued from a business to the workforce, to the talent market, or to the education system, which clearly clarifies the demand the business has for particular skills. So important for business to both identify the skills that it needs and then to send the right signals to the right organizations to tell them the skills that the business needs. And so then they can react in the right way to provide the pipeline of talent that the organization is going to need into the future. Step 4 is around developing and implementing an upskilling program. So most learning programs require significant financial investment, time and resources to organize. So important, therefore, to get long-term buy-in to these programs that they are operating efficiently and delivering what they need to. Ensuring that the initiative is developed and implemented in the most efficient way is really essential. A particularly effective model is continual learning. So learning is happening regularly and integrated with the rest of a person's professional life. And it's really important to deliver not only the knowledge that's needed, but also then the opportunities to use that knowledge and to apply it practically before it evaporates, having just gone in one ear and out of the other. So really important to have the right systems in place, and look forward to hearing from some of our member companies and the companies involved in this report later on in this session around those effective programs that they have in place. And finally, as always, it's important to measure the success of the program, to know where it's working, where it's not working. Really imperative in terms of its success and driving the right objectives. As always with measurement, the devil is in the metrics. So important to develop the right metrics to look around outputs, outcomes, and impact as we're looking to ascertain the degree to which the skills program we are developing has been successful. So this was really the core of the CHRO guide, the guide for CHROs that we've developed together with GAN and PwC and the member companies that I mentioned earlier. This sort of sets the foundation, if you like, for good practice in this area, and we're delighted to have done so. Bringing it to life a little bit more are a series of case studies, which you can find at the link highlighted at the bottom of this slide. All of these case studies freely available, and they really bring to life some of the different steps along that journey to a sustainable skills development strategy. And so please do take a look. But yeah, really excited now to hear about some of these case studies live, if you like, from our members that we have online, and really excited to join the discussion and to dig in a little bit to the detail of what I've gone through and understand how it works in practice. So I'll wrap things up from my side. Just to finish, say if you do have any questions regarding WBCSD or any of its other programs around the future of work or Vision 2050 or anything else, please do feel free to get in touch with me via the email address shown there. So I'll wrap it up from my side and very much looking forward to the panel discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, James. Really appreciate you giving us that context and setting the scene. Some important pointers, I think, that you've highlighted, including the threats. And I think we cannot plan an efficient strategy if we don't take into account the internal and external threats. I think the guide, as you said, really gets to the heart of the action, and very tangible action points have been proposed in there. And I think it's clear that, for an effective skills strategy, organizations need leadership, you need planning and forecasting, but probably most important is that culture of engagement, of learning, of trust, and the need for diversity and inclusion. And I think it's good that these are conversations that are happening more and more often, and in very open and transparent ways. So let's build on those sentiments in the panel discussion that we're going to move into. So welcome Juliette, Francois, Donatello, and Idano, and Alison. It's a real pleasure to have you participate today. There have been such fascinating information that you've very openly shared. I think that's also so important. We've seen on several occasions now through the last year that peer-to-peer learning is becoming such an important factor amongst business, within our partners and across country networks, because we're all dealing with similar challenges. Even though the sectors may be different, the people challenge tend to be quite similar across organizations, and I think we're all looking for help and guidance. So Juliette, if we can start with you, please. We know that PwC is doing so much in terms of research, and trying to unpack what the future of work looks like now and will look like in the future. What trends do you see emerging as a result both of COVID on the labor market, as well as the increasing influence of technology in the workplace?
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you this morning. A couple of things. From an organisational point of view, PwC, we invested heavily in our digital upskilling programme, which has really stood us in good stead to really respond to the marketplace challenges that we have. So as an example, we now have people trained in lots of digital tools that are developing apps and products and giving them to clients almost in the moment and as they're responding to client issues. So that's been a really big uptake, and that's not just because of COVID, that's generally. I guess what's COVID has done for us and many other organisations has really accelerated people's need to really invest in the soft skills as well, and particularly around, it's given massive opportunity for younger people and people with more diverse backgrounds to come into the workplace and really demonstrate their talent in a very different way. So our junior colleagues, from not just our organisation but throughout all other organisations, have given opportunities to junior colleagues through COVID, through the remote world, that they would never have had, particularly with regard to kind of client engagement. I guess the other thing it's done is highlight the need for leadership skills. And I guess the remote world has really taken those up a notch and getting leaders to lead in a very different way. Now that was coming anyway. We know that was coming anyway, but actually that's accelerated the need for leaders to really lead in a very different way. It's not about presenteeism. That has all accelerated, and the need for that compassionate leader, those who respect well-being, that trust their people, that coach and guide, has become more to the fore. So those are a couple of observations. The things that have remained the same and the things that are still in deficit are around innovation and agility. So getting people, getting organisations to develop skills around innovation, which start in the classroom, to that demand signal point that James made, start in the classroom about innovation and agility, getting people to respond to change in the moment and not be stuck in ways of working now. So those two things have remained constant, and they're still a worry for many chief executives. in citing innovation as one of the key areas that they're really in deficit still. So COVID has brought many opportunities, but also many challenges, and has just accelerated our thinking. I think the other thing it's done, it's really helped us develop skills in different ways. So the whole remote learning programs, again, has really brought access to skills development that you would never have seen before. So again, that's a very positive thing that's happened out of COVID.
Thank you, Juliet. I think what struck me was this whole innovation deficit, because we've been forced to respond, but sometimes it's been knee-jerk in some ways. So how do we do that in a way that's part of the strategy? How do you build innovation? And I think that's a really good point to move on to Francois. So Francois, perhaps you'd also like to tell the audience what Firmenich does, because we know how big Firmenich is, but as an organization, probably you're not that well known, yet you touch our lives every day, I'm sure. But specifically what I wanted to ask you is, an organization that relies so much on technology, where does innovation fit within the skills planning approaches within Firmenich? And how do you take into account innovation when preparing your strategies? And how far into the future are you looking at the moment?
And it's a big topic. Innovation is part of our heritage since more than 25 years. And our investment is 10% of our turnover in innovation, because it's really where we can exist and really develop breakthrough innovation for long term, knowing that we are in a domain that's perfumery and flavors that request a project in terms of innovation that lasts at least 10 years of investment in order to have a productive view. But innovation is also mindset, and more than ever, you just mentioned the COVID, and Juliet, you summarized very well our feeling, is also to take in consideration that was perhaps not so much the case in the future, in the past, that is the macro trends, the reality and the market insight, that we need to be more and more influenced and fast, agile, in order to understand how fast and how important are the decisions we are taking for the future. Then, to answer to the rapid technology evolution, you need a curiosity, you need to have a lot of exchange, you need to be very global social, economic polarization, that's needed to be a focus. But also to listen to workforce, then to exchange through the 360 degrees, to have a campus and a forum of ideas, and that is not touching only innovation, but also the upskilling that you need to do in order to answer to the need of the future. And therefore, that you cannot do it without a strong process and KPIs that help you to say where we will focus in the future in our innovation mindset that is touching creation, processes, new technology, new molecules is very large as such. But the interconnecting tools and systems are very important, because more than ever alignment needs to be there. Everything needs to be based on facts. Sometimes, obviously, the sensitivity, the creativity is coming from, particularly for the creation, on what do you feel, and that is important to listen, but the work needs to be based on facts first. Therefore, data analytics is more important than ever. You need to use your data of the past in order to create the trend of the future, because the history will give you also an insight, and you need to interconnect, in fact, the fact base that you have gathered in order to interlink that with the macro trend, which is very important, and insisting on that, and COVID demonstrate that the way of working changed a lot, the way of thinking, the backside also of some of these aspects to the smarter working at a certain moment that create also isolation, that create other problems that you have to need and to cope with and take care of the mental health. We should not absolutely forget that the new setup and the new organization requires also to take care of different way and how you perceive your new way of working. Then all this interconnection together create a setup that you know where you need to focus on including, obviously, the sustainability aspect that is part of our world. That is a very complex one that needs a lot of discipline and organization to answer to this important question.
Thank you, Francois. And I think you, as with Juliet, raised some really important points. And I think that the first point was about the need to invest in innovation. It has to be a targeted organizational strategy. It has to be a line item in budgets and planning. I think I like this idea of listening to the workforce. It's this issue of engagement, real consultation and engagement. And taking the perspectives of employees into account. And I think importantly also is this need for a systematic approach. It can't be ad hoc, it can't be short term, it has to be processes that are built in and has the buy-in, I think, of the people in the organization. And lastly, that point about mental health, probably for the first time in my career, and I'm sure for many others, we are openly talking about mental health, the impact on well-being, genuine concern for employees. Employee well-being is not just a call center that you can phone if you're feeling a little bit stressed. It's being built into employee engagement strategies. And I think it's critically important because if nothing else, our mental health has been affected probably first by COVID, then the physical impact, and then the impact on work. So, these are such important elements that need more discussion, need more engagement. We can probably spend a day talking about these issues, but thank you for raising it in this short time. So, Donatella, we're going to come to you now, and I think, your responsibility is development, engagement and welfare, looking after learning and looking after employee well-being. And my question to you is really, how do we take into account the range of employee engagement and development issues, particularly in current times? And how do you bring employees at Pirelli into the talent planning process? And I think this leads very nicely from Francois' input.
In fact, definitely the two experiences are very strongly linked. I have to say that I agree with you when you were talking about the fact that for the very first time, we as a HR professional really experienced that well-being, employee well-being was on the top management agenda. And that never happened, at least also in my history, according to my history. But of course, that was led mainly by the big tragedy which occurred, the dramatic tragedy which occurred after the explosion of COVID pandemic. And immediately after the first weeks, we realized that not we as HR, but also the senior management realized dramatically that the sense of belonging should have been something to tackle also on their table, which is really the big news, I think. So we started at the very beginning to be worried about how to strengthen the sense of belonging of our people, even though they were remotely working, and also very worried. You may remember at the very beginning how was the situation. I'm talking about March and April last year, and also the sense of loneliness that people were feeling, and these would have definitely affected the performance level. That's for sure. So the link is this. So how can we, and that's where the first big question came up. How can we ensure effectiveness in performance, even in this situation? And this situation, which is of course unusual and hopefully will never happen again, but yet gave us a lot of hints for the future. And what we learned that, as you were saying, some responses that the company gave, at least in Pirelli, but I know that other companies did the same job. So the responses that we gave somehow were able to overcome the difficulty I was mentioning, but now are becoming the new normal. So the new responses that an effective company should give, independently on the emergency, I mean. So we had some learned lessons. Which are the 3 learned lessons that I would like to share with you? The first, which is leading to engagement and leading to development both. The first learned lesson is, again, this important new focus on people well-being. So people well-being is something which has to be in the hands of the senior management of any managers. And this is something that now it has been gained, and I guess it's difficult to come back. So that's the first point. So now we have to keep the kettle boiling, you say. So keep going on investing in these activities. Second, managers, leadership. Someone was talking about caring leadership or something like that. I don't remember the exact word. For sure, whatever is the title we give to this kind of new leadership style is mainly, whatever is the name, is focused on the ability to lead differently people, more listening skill, more emotional intelligence skills. I would again come back to Goleman lesson learned, because I think that even more now than ever, they are more relevant and important for leaders. So the second axis is continuing investing on leaders. By the way, they will have a new challenge now for the new normal way of working, which is the one we are starting to live now in the forthcoming months, hopefully, is that they will, I mean, the new normality for them will be to lead hybrid teams. Some of them will be present in the office, some other won't be present, and this mix is strongly varying, of course. And so how to deal with a team, keeping them engaged, while performing respectfully of individuals, but yet working in an hybrid forms. So that's, I think, the new frontier for an effective management. And the third axis, and then we come up with the skill issues, the skill reskilling issues, is that we discovered, I'm not saying by chance, but due to the emergency situation, we said, look, the question was very simple. I'm even ashamed to say that, but silly and simple questions probably may change the history of a company. So the question was, okay, we have a lot of people, it was March, April, all over the world, we have a lot of people which are blocked at home with few things to do, because really it took some weeks to reshape a pure virtual way of working in a company, a pure virtualized way of working. So we said, okay, take the opportunity to make a massive reskilling campaign on one side, an upskilling campaign on the other side, namely in functions are more devoted to innovation, of course. And let's take this as a big opportunity, of course, virtually managed. And the response was massive and was really, it was an engagement response. So we discovered that that was the linkage between engagement and upskilling or reskilling, depending on the focus you have. And so now we have learned the lesson, and we are launching more and more upskilling, more than reskilling, frankly, upskilling campaign in order to really keep our workforce more motivated, because they are more employable. And they realize the value of it even more now after the pandemic. I'm not saying after because we're still in the middle of it, but anyway. So these are the 3 main lessons learned. And the last one, of course, is bringing this an answer to your question. So how do we keep engaged, upskilled, and we prepare ourselves to a more proper succession planning process, keeping always people updated in their skill profile.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Donatella. I think it's fascinating, those 3 points, because as you say, we probably knew them all along, but we just didn't focus our attention and have a deliberate strategy around that. And I particularly like this focus that you have on upskilling, because it's giving, opportunities for career pathway development, for career planning. It's opening people to new avenues that they possibly didn't know existed. And it does have to be a very focused intervention. And you need all parts of the organization to buy into that strategy. It can't just be a learning and development function. It needs the business and the operations to partner as well on that. So thank you very much. And I think, in all of these, the role of leadership and engaged leadership is critical. And I'm sure, many business schools are going to need to rethink some of their leadership components in MBAs and other management development programs, because the issue of emotional intelligence in successful and effective management has to become a focus area for that, I think, and not just the idea of the bottom line. So thank you for your input. Idano, if we can come to you, and I know that you're dialing in from your phone, and I appreciate that. We're learning every day that our organizations work on different platforms, and one doesn't always integrate with the other, but thank you for trying. But I wanted to check with you, Idano, if you could share some of the key trends that you're seeing that's influencing organizational design and workforce development, and how do you apply this to a global talent pool? Pirelli is a brand that's known across the world, but each country context is different. And how do you do this as an organization for this global pool?
Yeah, thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. Actually, you're right. We are learning from, all the experiences that we're doing due to the COVID-19, due to the disruption in several businesses, due to the issue of the supply chain. And actually, I think that, as Juliet maybe was mentioning at the beginning, the pandemic just accelerated some trends that we were already, looking at before the COVID-19. Actually, just to set the context, we had, I think, two main big movement ongoing, big stuff ongoing. The first one was the digital transformation that actually started already since several years. And then, the COVID-19 outbreak that basically accelerated this need for having digital tools, allowing a faster response to the changing needs of the organization. The main effect of the pandemic was also that several companies, also ourselves, were forced to review or to just adjust a little bit the business model, the organizational model. And this is basically bringing us to how the companies are evolving their way of working and also how they are evolving their organization. Here, what I can see is basically there are two main forces that are shaping the organization design. The first one is that we are, over the time, basically bringing all together people from different functions, from different departments, from different regions to solve complex issues. So basically, over the last few months, we created a lot of ad hoc temporary teams, which have basically three main characteristics. The first one, as I was mentioning, is that they are coming from different functions, different regions. The second one is that normally they are digitally enabled, so use digital tools to perform their activities. And the third one is that they are task-based. So we are basically overcoming the traditional organizational structure in which we have function, and basically the function are accountable for achieving a certain objective. Now we have interfunctional team, name it as you wish, point of delivery, fluid teams, and so on, that are basically responsible for solving the task, solving the issue. And this is also flattening the entire organization, having less layers and having a faster response to the changing scenario. The second one, the second main trend that I can see is that basically there are a wider range of activities that we're asking to be performed to single people. to a single person. So you have basically a wider range of activities considered into a job description of a single role. If you think about 10 years ago, and if I think now, how many tasks basically we are considering when we are drawing down a job description is amazing. And this is basically enabled also by providing tools that actually are helping the people to have a data-based data management decision making. You can also consider, how is changing the role of the operators in our factories due to the automation. Right now, if I can think about having a maintenance technician in our plant in Silao, adjusting a breakdown in the machine, wearing a HoloLens with a camera connected directly with the engineers here in Milan. And basically, the engineers in the headquarters are interacting with the maintenance technician and guiding him in solving an issue. So people are able to perform much more complex tasks in a faster way, in a more effective way. So I think those are the two main trends that I can see emerging and accelerating over the last period. An organization which is much more connected and job roles that are wider and for sure much more complex compared with the past.
Thank you, Idano. And as you're speaking, I'm just thinking the potential impact that this will have on wage negotiations and workforce conditions, etc. So it does open a whole wider set of issues. But in terms of the takeaways from your contribution, I think very importantly it has been the need to make digital tools accessible and available. This includes hardware. So some staff may have not had laptops, and trainees, those in apprentices, for example. So making that hardware available. But I also know personally of people who had to have data bought for them, who've had to put in fiber because they need to be connected all the time. So there's a different set of connectivity issues that come. I think very interestingly is this expanded role that we're all taking on. And I think we can, each of us on the call, personally attest to the fact that we've done far more functions over the last year than maybe we've done, including becoming literate on different platforms, technology platforms. So it's been a very interesting 12 months. But I think the other point about the influence of technology and automation is key, and it's something that the guide has tried to explore. But I think what I wanted to also point out is the opportunity factor that comes with the automation, the chance to upskill workers to do more complex tasks, the need for employers to create these upskilling opportunities. So the role of learning and development is going to become more enhanced in organizations as we take this shift to increased automation, increased technology. And I think this is where, Alison, you come in very nicely at this point. Everything's flowed this morning, so I'm really pleased about that. But the insurance sector is one sector that's really been at the forefront of automation and the influence of technology in your operations. And as Zurich Insurance, you're seeing increasingly AI technology getting more embedded into the business operations. So how does this impact on upskilling, reskilling, and new skills development opportunities? And what challenges do you foresee for the organization?
So I think that first of all, when we think about automation and robotics and augmentation of roles as well, I think it's really important to understand what your start point is and where you're moving towards. So actually, some time ago, we did some really in-depth analysis with Fathom and their workforce analytics platform, and also with PwC as well. And that was so that we could really understand what impact the technologies, these disruptive technologies, would have on our workforce over time. And with that, we needed to consider what our business strategy is, but also what our technology roadmap was as well. Where are we on that technology continuum to enable us to deploy some of these technologies or not? And the result of that really was we came up with a 5-point plan. And the 5 points really quickly were targeted reskilling and upskilling, which I'm going to just canter through a little bit of what we did. But also, how could we build a more agile internal talent marketplace and talent mobility? What part do our early career programs, our apprentice, graduate and intern programs play in this? And also, how can we consider our recruitment practices to enable us to be fit for the future? So I guess really when I think about reskilling, the objective is how can we reskill people for critical, in-demand roles that are scarce in Zurich, that are also scarce in the external market. And our approach really was to set up a number of skills academies. And the skills academies really, the objective is to provide individuals with substantive new skills, really substantive new skills that can enable enhance the new career paths and also enable Zurich to build our in-house skills capacity and not actually rely on the external, more volatile market to do that. So it was really important that a number of speakers have said today that really we had our senior leadership team bought into what we were doing and why, what was the need, what was the benefit. And actually, we all know, of course, that culture, mindset and behaviours are really the key underpin of change. It's not just about delivering a whole bunch of initiatives to fix a problem. It's also really changing the way that we think about learning in the workplace as well. So the first academy we launched was the Data Academy. And within that was really looking at data analytic, data visualization, predictive analytic skills, and all of our employees applying them to real business challenges. So again, earlier we touched on to really get that skills transfer into the workforce, not something that they may theoretically dip into at some point into the future, but learn a skill, apply it, hone it, and then actually use it going forward so that that true skills transfer takes place. We expanded it to include data science, and in actual fact in the UK we have an apprenticeship levy, and we've utilised our levy funding to deliver this for both our existing employees, upskilling, reskilling, but also for some of our incoming employees as well. The second academy we've just piloted was the Automation Academy. And this was piloted with employees from across our claims and underwriting teams, actually. And it was delivered by our continuous improvement and automation team. And I truly believe it's a really powerful proposition because it combines our employees' expertise of their business areas, of claims and underwriting, and the processes that we use within those functions, and importantly, their knowledge of the customers, also alongside with those automation skills. So the aim is to reduce the time spent on repetitive tasks and free people up in the organisation to focus on more value-adding and enriching activity. And it's really been a lot of work for everybody involved, but really worthwhile. And I guess we're a couple of key points. Firstly, we actively took the decision to inject those skills across the breadth of our business under the governance of our really brilliant automation and data teams, but enabling our business functions with those skills and capabilities, rather than just exponentially growing our operations function. And then secondly, we invited applications for the academy. So much like Donatella was saying, and the engagement from Pirelli employees when they could get engaged with it, the people were invited to apply, put themselves forward so that they would be truly engaged with their development journey. And I should also add that it's really a significant time commitment, with individuals spending, between 20 and 40% of their time in academy learning. And we've also introduced a range of other academies as well, from leadership. Actually, we've heard a lot about that today, but leadership academies and coaching and DevOps as well. And so I guess the second area I just wanted to touch on was upskilling as well, which takes a much broader approach. And we have a huge, we're very lucky, we've got a huge amount of resources. And through our dedicated learning platforms, all of our employees absolutely have access to curated topic content that's relevant to them, covering from things such as Digital Fluid Book, which aims to baseline the knowledge across the whole organisation, to Zurich specific content, LinkedIn Learning, and also being able to think about doing a skills audit exercise to think about what their skills may look like today, and where they may need to actually think about, these are some of the skills that I need to get onto in the future, and then link towards the steps that they can take to start developing themselves. So it's really important to build awareness and an influence mindset as well. And we try and do that through a number of ways, through various learning campaigns, from Be Future Ready, Curiosity Ambassadors, engaging with things like digital learning days. Really importantly, again, we've spoken about this a number of times, support from our leaders and storytelling from both people that are involved in initiatives and from our leaders as well, and also enabling that time for people to get involved with their learning. And then also through other mechanisms that we have available to us through the performance development cycle. So when setting development goals and IDPs, the skills conversation that comes in there, as well as through career conversations too. And also what we're really aware of is that future skills, when we talk about future skills, we're often talking about data and robotics and cyber, which can feel, you know, quite different areas to some people to get onto. They can feel, you know, actually, you know, these are future work skills. Are they for me? But actually, let's not forget those uniquely human skills that are really just as important to develop. So let's not forget how we work exceptionally with others, those complex problem-solving skills that people need, that critical thinking, creative thinking to the innovation point, and topics such as empathy and resilience. I mean, we know there's a whole bunch of statistics out there, the WEF saying, you know, all employees will need to reskill, or 50% of employees will need to reskill by 2025, and that's not that far away. 40% of core skills are expected to change in the next 5 years, and also, of course, the half-life of digital skills. So one of the things actually that on a global space Zurich are looking at is, you know, what is our skills framework as we move into the future? And how can we move to a more skills and impact focused role profiles and incorporating skills assessment, career planning, but the development support and the talent mobility piece across our organisation into an integrated solution. And we know change can be difficult for many as well. Obviously, we've got, you know, we're in the middle of the pandemic at the moment. But people really have generally responded well to the pandemic. They have learnt new skills, they have learnt new ways of working, they have engaged with different technology. But we know it can feel different. So, I mean, I think some of the challenges really for us are, how can we harness technology? How can we utilise in an organisation like ours that really deep technical people expertise, and also create some foresight for ourselves to create the skills agility that we need to enable our business strategy, to enable work sustainability commitments, and those also do include our D&I aspirations and wellbeing commitments as well, and deliver for our customers. So of course we'll need to iterate our response as we go along and consider new ways of working, that half-life of skills, and also how we collaborate across our industry and beyond, and some of the supporting structures that we need to put in place to enable our work sustainability agenda, really. It's a big topic.
Thank you, Alison. I can see how much investment and how much commitment there is on the part of Zurich, and I think you've taken this very integrated approach. I think you use the terminology integrated solutions, but some of my takeaways from you was this point about culture, mindset, behaviors, and the role of soft skills. And you know, I think back to something that we've often said in different fora, and that's, hard skills can be taught. But unless you have the right attitude, it's very difficult to actually do reskilling and upskilling. And this is where, that age-old conundrum about who's actually responsible for skills development.
Yeah.
Is it the employer? Is it the employee? And it really is a partnership. It's a combination. You need the employer to create an enabling environment, but you also need the commitment of the individual or the group of employees to take up the opportunity and be committed to, that there's the time commitment on the part of the employee, there's the cost and resourcing commitment on the part of the organization. So really important points. And I think the other area that you highlighted was the role of the business teams in driving this. So it's not just led from L&D, for example. It's not, the HR function forcing this onto the business. It's actually engaged, and it's seen as a business imperative. That's probably one of the big challenges that HR colleagues come up against often, how to get this cooperation and partnership within the business. So thank you very much for sharing that. I'm going to hand over to Monique Malcolm-Hay now. And Monique, before you get to the Q&A, perhaps you can share your experience, having led so much of this work in putting the guide together, some of your key takeaways from the experience, please.
Yes, definitely. No, thank you, Nazreen. And it's been really interesting hearing all the different perspectives from the different organizations that we have on the call today. I think what's most interesting is seeing how people have tackled sort of the skills strategy differently, depending on what sector they're in and sort of where they're located as well. Happy to share more about my experience. So I guess to give a bit of context, as Nazreen mentioned earlier, I work at PwC, and I'm a global program manager for PwC's New World, New Skills initiative. And essentially what that initiative looks to do is, so if I take a step back, at PwC, we have a really sort of large scale program that we run called Digitize the Network. And it's featured in this guide as well. And really what that program is about is it's upskilling our 280,000 people around the world. And we've had great experience with that so far over the last few years, and have done a lot of work setting up digital academies and really sort of embracing a new culture within the firm around innovation and upskilling. But New World, New Skills is basically looking at what we've done internally and saying, okay, how can we as a firm help to upskill the rest of the world? What is it that we can do to really work with other organizations and also local communities and the wider society to help them to upskill too? So we do a number of different things, such as working with our clients and helping them to develop skill strategies, as well as participating in international fora. So actually this week, the Global Solutions Summit is taking place, and we have a number of our PwC global leaders speaking at that summit to talk about sort of skills and what needs to be done in the future. And then also we do a lot of CSR type activity around this as well. So a lot of voluntary work. The idea is to sort of upskill our people, and then they can go into local communities and upskill others. So I guess, through my experience of working on New World, New Skills, it's just been really interesting to kind of, I guess, first of all, see that it's a much more complex issue than maybe some people first imagined. So some of the themes that we've discussed on this session today around the fact that it's not just about digital skills, it's also around human skills and soft skills. And then now something else that is coming into the conversation is around ESG skills as well. And how can we upskill people on that to ensure that they have that knowledge too? So that's definitely been a major takeaway. But also in terms of developing the CHRO guide that we're discussing today, I think one point that really did stick out was the fact that when an organization is just about to start their journey on developing a skill strategy, it's really important to think about what stage of the learning journey is going to be most appropriate for that organization to focus on. So for example, is it about focusing on early talent and graduates, or apprentices or people who have just entered into the firm, or is it about developing, management and leadership and trying to improve their skills? Or do we go all the way back and start to think about, okay, what can we do to engage with high schools and secondary schools and upskill younger people so that by the time they're ready to enter the workforce, they already sort of have those skills or already on that pathway. So I think that's been definitely really interesting, a really interesting aspect of the guide. But I guess in terms of the Q&A session, it'd be really great to ask some questions from the audience to some of our panelists. So for everybody that's tuned in, definitely feel free to put some questions in the chat. And also there's some questions that we have here already as well. So earlier in today's session, James mentioned that one of the risks of inaction is a decline in diversity and inclusion. So if organizations and companies do not act on developing appropriate skill strategies, that could lead to a decline in diversity and inclusion in their organization. So I guess, Donatella, given the lessons that Pirelli has learnt about employee engagement, how can organizations better reach young girls and women and other underserved populations when attracting and recruiting talent? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
Okay, let's split the question into two. I'm sorry, I have a bad feedback. Okay, great, audio feedback. Okay, so let's split the question into two parts, I guess. So one is if we focus on the current employees, Pirelli employees, and another one is concerning the talent acquisition process. And then talking about this second point, also I bring in also Idano, which is leading also this department. So talking about current employees, frankly, I'm a little bit harsh on that, so I just anticipate. I don't think that a company should do something to upskill female population differently than the male population, especially because if there are problems, if there are some problems, the problems are in the male population. So, by the way, this is something which is to be tackled with the employees as a unique entity, as a unique population. We should be able to be more inclusive. So talking about employees, what we are going to do, I didn't mention because we had few time, is that we have, not we in Pirelli, but most of the companies now have discovered that one of the difficulties that quite often women professionals and managers are facing is that they don't have a proper analytical and mathematical background. That because, of course, of the STEM education is not widely spread among the female population. I would say at global level. So what we do normally is that in the big upskilling campaign that we are carrying out, and we carried out in 2020, one of the major stream of upskilling was in fact focused on this: how to deal with data, how to deal with technologies, even simple statistics concept. So which have to be spread anywhere in the company, independently on the work that people do. So this, I think, is the good way to support this obstacle, which is there, by the way. Talking about the external people, so those which we would like to have on board in Pirelli, on the other side, of course, the job is different on this case. So I guess that all the activities that we can do, will do, of course, mainly at the secondary school level, because once you are at the university, you are already there. The choice has been already made. So we think that we have to support the educational system, the national educational systems, in making accessible, theoretically accessible, mentally accessible, also the STEM discipline to everyone, because there is clearly a bias, a cultural bias on that, beyond that. So that's my perception. So what we have to do is to make everyone passionate about technologies, about data, about all this stuff, because this is not something esoteric, which is only for few male super experts normally. Idano, I'm asking to jump in, because if you want, because you are dealing with recruitment activities too, so maybe you have some other hints you may have.
No, just to build on what Donatella was saying, I mean, it's clear that to address this issue, which is not only a social issue, because I think that over the next years we're going to face a shortage of talent, of skill in several countries all around the world. I mean, the key is to have a closer collaboration between the public sector and the corporate worlds. The corporate world, where many companies, I mean, are already active in effort in the field of recruitment, career advancement, promotion of positive role model, as well as also in explaining the opportunity starting at school level, with whom internship or apprenticeship can be organized. But overall, I think that the solution, the main activity, the main priority should be basically to develop a country-specific collaboration between corporations and public sector, normally with maybe 10-year origin, because of that is the time frame to embrace the complete educational life cycle. So having a constant and closer collaboration between the public sector and the business sector. That's my thought, basically.
Fantastic. No, that's really interesting. And I completely agree around I think, targeting secondary school is a good time to get in there to really help, women and people from, girls and people from underrepresented backgrounds to sort of think about what route they want to go in and get them excited, as you said, Donatella, about sort of data analytics and technology. So that is really interesting. And I guess something else that was mentioned earlier in today's session by Nazreen is the fact that automation can actually create opportunities. So Alison, given that Zurich Insurance has experience with launching an automation academy, how can digital transformation lessen the digital divide and provide more opportunities to those currently affected by changing trends in sectors?
That's that's quite a big question. So I guess, I'm just going to give there's some. It's actually partly back to women. Sorry, I just want to cover that as well, really. So I can't help it, but partly back to women as well. In actual fact, we know that women are far more likely to put themselves forward or apply for a job unless they feel they are kind of 100 or 120% good fit for a role. So we know there is a different mindset that women have when they are looking for roles. And I think that the way that we often advertise roles are very much around, you need to have this level of experience, you need to have completed these roles. So there can be quite a specific list that sometimes women can say, actually, I can't do all of that, so I don't put myself forward. So I think it's really important that we sort of start looking at actually what are the really important skills and the transferable skills, and how can we measure people's potential to be able to complete a role or learn, and that learning agility, rather than actually am I box ready with those skills today? Because if we continue with am I box ready with those skills for today, then we're not opening up a more diverse applicant pool. So I really think that sort of, that plays in both internally and externally in the way that actually we kind of approach some of our recruitment in terms of attracting a more diverse pool, but then the practices actually that we use throughout an assessment process, actually, to bring a broader applicant pool into organisations, to provide more opportunities, and actually hopefully it becomes self-perpetuating in terms of, you know, I can do that. Well, you know, why not offer a development package with a role opportunity? You know, we bring you in, you bring these skills, and we will help you know, develop you alongside that, perpetuating that lifelong development journey as well. So sorry, I know that wasn't the question at all, but I just wanted to jump in on that. So I guess how can we utilise and not create more of a digital divide? I mean, you know, technology is here in the workplace, and there's no two ways about that. And we're utilising the technology to provide, you know, better outcomes to customers, but also hopefully for our employees as well, because once they feel confident and competent, actually, you know, some of the frankly lower value or more boring tasks, or even tasks which actually human can bring error into, can be taken away, and they can be, you know, they can be taken care of, so that it allows people to focus on some more different value activities. So I think it's about people feeling confident, having access to, you know, you don't necessarily have to go into robotics process, you know, automation tools, etc., but utilizing those tools and feeling more confident in them. And it's been a difficult time, because on the one hand you need to create, let me say, a smouldering platform for people to feel the need to get involved and take ownership of some of their skills development, but also, you know, in a supportive environment with access to the tools and the support that they need. And it also does really depend on the adoption of your organisation in terms of their technologies as well. I mean, you know, if you haven't got you know, various predictive analytics or chatbots or etc., you do really need to take into account the context within which you're working. So it's really hard, because actually also you need the skills really quite quickly as well. We don't actually know definitively what we're going to need in 5 years and have 5 years to spend developing people. We need to actually be really agile. So finding more agile ways in terms of injecting those skills and giving people the opportunities at the right time is a challenge too. Haven't got all the answers.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point around the fact that, yeah, you do need to be agile, and it is really difficult to sort of get that right and you know, ensure that that digital divide doesn't get wider and is actually lessened at the same time. And actually going back to the points that you were making around diversity and inclusion as well, yeah, it's really interesting, because I was actually in speaking at an event a couple of weeks ago. And one of the points that was made, which really brings to light sort of some of the issues around skill strategies and diversity and inclusion, is the fact that, you know, when you are somebody from an underrepresented background in the workplace, that can often lead to, you know, weaker relationships, or relationships that aren't as strong as perhaps people who are more represented. And what that means is, especially when we're talking about human skills and soft skills, you might not get that same sort of informal learning that the people with the stronger relationships get. So I think it is really important to sort of, yeah, really acknowledge some of these issues and incorporate it into the strategies that are being put in place. So the last question that we have here is sort of building on what you were saying, Alison, about being agile. So what strategy should companies focus on to ensure the development of an agile and responsive workforce in light of the impact of COVID and changing workforce needs? So Francois, I don't know if you want to pitch in here on this question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Agility, in fact, it's also related to speed. Then if, and that's, by the way, one of our also priority and objective for the future of work. And it's what is the success of agility? And normally it's to reduce time you spend on projects, on activities. It's also to increase the speed on the answer to customer or request or project deadline. And it's really a question of lead time. As such, agility, and you mentioned the question about automation, is related to that. And the condition that it's facilitated the work of the day-to-day. And to rebound on the previous question, to link to the agility, I give you an example of one of our big factory in Geneva, in perfumery, that had changed totally the job of operators. That was more focused on loading, it was more physical work. And we automated fully the manufacturing plant in order to have more than 90% automated, and they changed their work totally of operators to take care of formula registration, managing, in fact, the new automation system that we have, and that we have reskilled totally their way of working. That has been a big plus. They are it's less painful, it's more knowledgeable, they are hyper motivated to do so. If you have on the additional responsibility on sustainability, that's really a responsibility that you have. You change really the job of operator change at 90% in the good way, without blocking or detrimental in terms of jobs. Then this agility is the responsibility of the company to give the tools in order to provide that, and 50% from the employee to be open to innovation, not to be afraid. Is the agility of mind to say that it's, if you help yourself, you will help in the future and you can help others. And this mindset of agility is also very interesting when you are open to the world, to the communities. We should not be agile. We cannot be agile and focusing only on our activities. We have a lot of collaboration that we name inclusive capitalism in order to facilitate the collaboration and the partnership. That is the real agility in the future, because you cannot react, and COVID was a good representation, in front of the unknown that you are not managing. Is only the way you can answer to this problematic that will give you the tools to succeed, and obviously to leverage and to upskill all the mindset skills that you need, but also the technicalities for each of your job that has been thoroughly programmed in the past for what we need at which percentage, keeping this agility to evolve year after year, because long program of upskilling is really working, except for some area in chemistry and pharma. But otherwise, you have this agility to update constantly the job that you need, the skills you need, technically and soft, in order to make it happen and to be competitive and also employable. Give this famous employability to everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that insightful answer. Just bearing in mind time, I am going to pass back to Nazreen now to close the event. But thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you to all of our panelists and the participants who've stayed online. It's been a fascinating discussion. I think we've really seen how the private sector can lead innovation in this space. As GAN Global, we work with our members and our partners to shape workforces of the future, and ultimately how the role of work-based learning can address the skills gap that we're seeing coming our way. And I think from today's discussion, there are a number of very practical solutions. I think opportunities that the participants can take into their own organizations. And I think to conclude on the positive note of the opportunity factor is something that I want to leave with all of you today. As difficult and as uncertain as the future is, as the future of work is, as Alison said, technology is here and now. The future of work is here. It's up to us to respond and to react with agility, with understanding the opportunities, to minimize the impact on organizations. But I think a really great chance for us to shape the future of work that we want to see. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to work with the WBCSD team, with the team from PwC to put out this guide. We encourage you to download the guide, to read it. I think I have found it personally enlightening, And I hope you do as well. So thank you very much. And wherever you are, please enjoy the rest of your day or your afternoon. So bye-bye, everyone, and keep safe.